When announcing the $130 billion JobKeeper scheme last month, the Prime Minister called it historic and said it would help 6 million Australians. Under the scheme, eligible businesses are entitled to $1,500 per fortnight per eligible employee for 6 months until the 27th of September. But there seem to be just as many questions about JobKeeper as there are applications for it. The ATO, the Fair Work Ombudsman and Employment Rights Legal Centre JobWatch have all reported a spike in queries.
JobWatch has been inundated with calls from desperate callers trying to find out what are their new working conditions, are they legal, and more particularly now since the introduction of the JobKeeper scheme, they want to ensure that those benefits are passed on to them.
One casual retail worker from Victoria told The Drum she was stood down when the pandemic hit and since told she'll remain stood down unless she agrees to work more than double her usual 8-hour week.
He said, look, by the way, don't worry about coming in because if you can't do more than 20 to 25 hours, we won't need you. Because under the new legislation with the JobKeeper, it's either 20 to 25 hours or you get the job seeker.
Earlier this week, the Prime Minister appeared to agree.
That's not an unreasonable request, that someone would work the hours that they're being paid for.
But his office has since clarified that unless the power to increase work hours is already baked into a worker's contract, bosses can't demand it. The scheme's one-in, all-in rule stipulates that any employer applying for JobKeeper must make it available to all eligible staff. But the retail worker who spoke to The Drum says that's not the case at her workplace. She says different rules are being applied for different staff.
My manager is working less because his children are being homeschooled now, but isn't it the same thing as me? I mean, I could have done less hours, but they wouldn't let me.
A full-time medical clinic manager told The Drum that after returning to work under JobKeeper, she was presented with a new contract to sign.
They are trying to change our contracts to fixed term and remove some of the underlying fundamentals of our previous contract, like sick leave and annual leave. Originally, I was told that if I don't sign, I will be stood down, but I actually got a call yesterday where they told me they need me to work and so they'll remove said contract.
While the Prime Minister continues to urge good faith negotiations, unions are warning that any changes to conditions must be reasonable.
The employer simply saying, I'm now getting this money and I'll tell you what to do, that's not on.
So the way the scheme was always intended to work was that, as you heard in that report, businesses would get payments from the government only after they'd already funneled the payments through to their staff. And part of the reason for that was the government wanted to get this scheme up and running in a tearing hurry, and it thought it was easier to get the payments flowing from businesses to their workers before the money was starting to come in from the tax office. But the problem was always going to be a big gap, especially at the start of the scheme. I mean, once this scheme gets up and running and employers are paying money out and money's coming in, the cash flow isn't so severe.
And the other thing, sorry to interrupt, that you were explaining was these businesses might have had a bigger wage bill than they might have had when they were operating because someone might have only been earning $600 a fortnight as a casual, but suddenly they've got to come up with the full amount of the JobKeeper, which is $1,500 per week. So they were maybe being asked to make a higher payroll with the shop shut or the business shuttered than right up until May.
Yeah, that's right. So if you were, for example, running a cafe and you've got a group of casual workers who typically maybe do a couple of shifts, maybe 3 or 4 shifts a week, all of a sudden under this scheme, you have to pay all of them $1,500 a fortnight, $750 a week. So your wages bill, and particularly for this sort of 4, 5, 6 week period before the money starts flowing into the tax office, ends up being way bigger than you ever had before. And at a time, of course, when your business is largely shut down. So good move, at least today, that there's some effort being made to try and get bridging finance available from the banks as a priority, because I was certainly hearing a lot of reports about businesses simply not able to get an answer quick enough.
OK, Craig, will this make the difference, do you think, or do you think some employers are thinking, look, I'll pick up a workforce on the other side, I can't be bothered administering all of this?
No, Ellen, the part that's been missed, and I'm at the coalface of trying to implement this, it's all well and good to say get the money out the door as quickly as possible, but they only open registrations on Monday, and the number 275,000 have already registered. We don't know yet whether we've been successful, so you don't know whether or not we're going to get the money back. The ATO are still issuing fact sheets as late as Tuesday on how this actually works, because don't forget, this is $120, $130 billion. If you think there's not going to be checks and balances down the track, you've got rocks in your head. So business...
Craig, can I get you some fantastic legal advice from Andrew, sitting on the other end of the phone here? You advise Andrew Stewart, some of the biggest law firms in the country. Would you be worried if you were a business and you had to put your hand on your heart, like Craig, and say, yep, I've got a 30% reduction in turnover, when you just don't know whether you do, and on that basis, you're paying staff, the JobKeeper, in the hope that the government might pay you back? Would you worry about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in fact, it's to a large extent, it's accountants around the country who are really trying to struggle with this at the moment. And the fact that we're getting new rules coming out by the day,
every day,
to clarify the turnover requirements. Look, what I think a lot of businesses may do is say, look, forget about it for April.
Right.
Let's look at this in a couple of weeks' time. But of course, just doing that much delays and diminishes the impact of this scheme, which is meant to, provide a pretty big assistance to try and keep small businesses alive and keep employment arrangements intact. And
the reality is they can't say, I'll put the single mother on New Start, I'll put the person with 3 kids on New Start, the 18-year-old who I know is living at home with mum and dad and will be all right. I can't say, well, I'll put them on JobKeeper. I can't say I won't put him on JobKeeper because it's one in, all in. Is that right?
The rules don't actually say that. I've got no idea why the government hasn't actually amended the rules to clarify that, and also to make it clear what employers can and can't ask their workers to do. But the government is now saying, Treasury's been saying, ATO is now confirming that you have to put all your eligible employees forward. So you can't, for example, as I know a number of small businesses would like to do, pay some of them the JobKeeper money to the extent that can be afforded, and then bring others on board as the money starts to flow in from the ATO.
Clear as mud, Craig.